Clones. Obviously, almost always an exact replica of a pre-existing character, but their creation can vary dramatically from science to magic. Same goes for their purpose, which we'll be talking about in this week's Trope video. Now quickly, a lot of people made a lot of corrections about Dragon Ball in my last video. Thank you. I'm still binging it on the side, and I knew that there was a lot I missed, so I'm glad that everyone's been pointing out the specifics and correcting me on everything I got wrong. I might make a video at some point to correct everything about it. Also, we've hit 2,000 subscribers. I do want to spiel on and thank everyone about it, but I'll leave that to the end of the video so we can get to the point of this video. We'll start with some of the most famous clones in pop culture. Whilst I did use Rex for the thumbnail, we'll be talking about the Star Wars clones in their entirety, in general, not just Rex. To talk about the clones, I'll have to give you a rundown on who they're cloned off of. If you already know Star Wars, probably don't need to listen to this. That being Jango Fett. Jango Fett was a well-known Mandalorian bounty hunter, a male human who grew up as a foundling, which is essentially a Mandalorian apprentice. He later became a Mandalorian warrior who was renowned for his marksmanship and unarmed combat, eventually becoming a bounty hunter. Years before though, a Jedi Master by the name of Sifo-Dyas had visions of the galaxy in war. And so without the approval of the Jedi, he contacted the planet of Kamino, which was well known for cloning, and made a deal where they could make an army. Somehow, Count Dooku learned of this. I'm assuming that the visions were planted by Palpatine, the ones of the galaxy in war, and he later told Dooku about it. But I'm just guessing, so don't take it as truth by any means. Anyway, he took control of the project after Sifo-Dyas died, possibly by the hand of the Sith, and was looking for a genetic template for the army of clone soldiers to be built off of. If it wasn't already obvious, he hired the Mandalorian Jango Fett to be the template, with Jango's payment being, obviously, credits, a massive amount of them, and a clone child of himself to raise as his son, who would eventually become Boba Fett. Eventually, the bounty hunter gained the attention of the Republic, who sent the Jedi Knight Obi-Wan Kenobi to suss things out. That was when the Republic was made aware of the clone army that Count Dooku was building. But instead of destroying all of the stuff that Dooku, technically Sifo-Dyas, had built, they took the army for themselves, which would show to have been a mistake later on. Jango Fett was later taken down by Mace Windu during the first Battle of Geonosis, but the many clones remain. Jedi were given ranks of generals and commanders and so on and so forth, who would lead legions of the clones, one of the most well-known ones being the 501st, who served under Anakin Skywalker, the ones that have blue on them, essentially. This also implies, like, I don't know how exactly the ranking system goes with all the numbers, but does this mean that there's 501 different legions of clones? These clones would essentially come out as test tube babies, their genomes modified to age faster, and with the help of growth acceleration, they could make fully grown adult clones faster. Oh, and they made them more open to command, probably with the organic brain chip that totally won't cause any issues later on. One may also notice that the older clones show more personality and independence throughout their series. For instance, Rex, who had modified his helmet outright to have his classic clone helmet visor attached to the new clone helmet rebreather. He also did some modifications for his armor, but I'm not really able to point them out. One may say that the clones became more independent over time as they grew older, but in actuality, the clone genome was modified with every other batch of clones being made to slowly remove their independence, which means that the newer clones are nearly an entirely blank slate of a human being. The only thing that they have in relation to Jango was his face, his voice, and his skills. But even then, their skills were honestly probably dulled down because of all the personality removal. Whilst there was a lot that happened between the clones' initial integration into the army and all the way to the Order, you know, Order 66, that one. It's all pretty much summed up in this series. I'm not about to explain every single episode of this series with clones in it. We'll be here for days. But we will skip to the end of the series, which is when Order 66 began, where the clones turned on the Jedi, and pretty much the Republic as a whole. After this, the clones were either turned into Imperial troops or tossed to the streets. Some thrived as rebels, whilst others met their demise. So these clones were made with intent, obviously. mainly to be a force for the Republic to command. But for the Sith, it was actually a deadly twist that they had planted for the Jedi ever since the start. And by the Sith, I mean the one Sith guy who knew all about it until Count Dooku learnt about it. But some clones became independent. Some managed to have kids on other planets. Like that one guy who had a baby with a Twi'lek, which I'm confused by because I thought that they weren't physically capable of it. Like they were genetically made to not be capable of reproducing, while others lived long lives that lasted beyond the defeat of Darth Vader. Point being, whilst the clones were all of the same man, no clone was exactly the same as another until probably near the end, where they were just pumping out like completely blank slates of clones, as I said before. And these clones weren't always perfect. You might have had some like 99, one of the best clones, by the way, rest in peace. Or they might have been intentionally modified to serve other purposes, like the Bad Batch. But of course, because I put Rex in the thumbnail, I should specifically get into him a little bit. He was one of the first few clones that were made, and from my knowledge, he is the oldest clone to exist in canon. This isn't including Boba Fett, by the way. He is a clone. For some reason, I don't want to consider him a clone, though. But yeah, Rex, he's canonically probably the oldest one, besides Boba Fett, and I'm pretty sure he hasn't had an official death in the series yet. Pretty sure that this guy, in the original trilogy movie, whilst not originally intended, was suggested to be Rex later on. Mainly thanks to how Rex looks here in Rebels as an older man in this armor. Also, his fit goes hard. Backing away from the galaxy far, far away though, we'll talk about Spider-Man. More specifically, my favorite clone of the guy, Kane. Now, it's a bit of a hear me out at the start because he's very brutal. Kane was born when the Jackal, one of Spider-Man's villains, attempted to clone the hero Spider-Man. Kane was the first attempt who was originally thought to be a success, but over time his body began to deform and his mind began to fall apart due to this deformation he had going on, showing that the clone process obviously hadn't been perfected. Now, instead of getting rid of him, the Jackal still wanted data on his first clone, so he let him roam free to see how long he could last for before he fully disintegrated. And surprisingly, he's survived for a long time for an unstable clone. The Jackal would then make another clone, Ben Reilly, but we're not here to talk about him. He's cool. He's a bit weird at the moment in the comics, but he was cool before that. But, you know, he's still important to the story somewhat, so he's still going to be integrated into it in a little bit. Norman Osborn, wanting to cause trouble, as usual, swapped the Jackal's files around, making Peter look like the clone and Ben seem like the original Peter. And Kane looked at these files too, coming to believe that Ben was the original Peter. Ben at the time had exiled himself after finding out that he was a clone to not interfere with Peter's life, and so Kane would essentially stalk him to see how the real Peter would act. Now, while doing this, Kane did find love. It was obviously a redhead, because he's still Peter Parker at heart. He fell for a police detective called Louise Kennedy, but he later learned that she was a corrupt cop who worked with criminals. And with his mental instability, he went insane and unfortunately took her life. But even after that, he still loved her in his heart. He would still continue to follow Ben. Unfortunately, he would still continue taking lives as he went along because he was a mentally unstable clone. But Ben had also found a partner at the time too. But eventually, Kane took her life as well, making it seem like a self-deletion, and framed Ben for all the people that he, Kane himself, had ended, which could be believed because they shared the same fingerprints. Unfortunately, it backfired because Peter also had those same fingerprints. Now, of course, Peter got arrested for this and he was put on trial in jail, and eventually he broke out. Kane would try to stop Ben from interfering with Peter's life, as at the time, a fake version of Aunt May was in hospital to try and mess with Peter, I guess. And Ben had heard about it and wanted to see her as well, because he's still technically Peter. And after having a vision of the future, which is one of Kane's powers, I'll get to those soon, he went on a ending spree. The vision was of Mary Jane in danger, and of course, due to his mental instability and being Peter Parker to an extent, he kind of jumped on any threat that appeared dangerous to Mary Jane. Obviously, Peter wasn't exactly happy about all this, and to make a long story short, he threatened to reveal his identity if Kane didn't own up for his crimes. Now, Kane wanted Peter to live a normal life, so he showed the court the mark of Kane, which is another one of his powers. Again, we'll get to it. Now, Kane would die a lot after this in his search for a cure for his disintegration. Yes, I say a lot, meaning that he did it more than once. This is a Marvel comic, what do you expect? He sacrificed himself for Peter, he was healed by the Jackal. He sacrificed himself for Peter again, and he was resurrected from the dead by Jackal. again, but like as a mutant spider thing this time. Thankfully though, during the events of Spider Island, he was thrown into a solution known only as the Cure, which was apparently made from anti-venom, which not only turned him back to his normal human self, but also fixed his DNA disintegration problem, making him a perfect Peter Parker clone, save he still had a little bit of scarring and deformation, but he wasn't disintegrating anymore. Also, he was still more than capable of being lethal. He would become an anti-hero of sorts, still stopping crimes that Peter would stop as Spider-Man, but now he would take the enemy out permanently sometimes, and maybe pocket a few bucks from the robber, because he needs money to live. Eventually, though, he would die again, but be reborn with even more altered powers. To save on time, he essentially became a more morally flexible Spider-Man. As for powers, other than the basic powers that Peter has, he has a super heightened spider sense that allows him to see the future sometimes, and his strength is notably higher due to him showing less restraint. The mark of Kane, which may be related to his wall crawling, allows him to burn things with his hands, but he might also be able to do it with other parts of his skin in general. His webbing is organic rather than made through web shooters. Oh, and due to his spider sense being on the same frequency as Peter's, he's able to sneak up on him without any issues. Alas, I think his spider spikes, the ones that came out of his wrists, were in his powerhouse, but I'm pretty sure they were taken away from him due to being a part of a deal with a spider god that he had lost the power from. Although I'm not entirely certain, he might still have them, I just don't think he does from what the wiki said. There is so many extra powers that these side Spider-Men get permanently, but Spider-Man always only gets temporary ones. I don't even remember his last permanent power-up, in all honesty. He's just always had the same powers all the time. But to the point, Kane was made to go against Spider-Man, in which he served his purpose, albeit not in the way his creator initially intended, in all honesty. Whilst his creation was not perfect, he still showed sides of Peter that would eventually be solidified, but with a more morally flexible packaging. As for his clothing, we have his original Kane outfit, which looks badass. I kind of want to cosplay it if I was ripped. His tarantula outfit, which looks a little like a Spider-Man Hobgoblin love child, and his iconic red and black Scarlet Spider look, which is what he sports nowadays. If I had a spider suit, it would look like that. Maybe with a few like white accents added to it, but it would be that. So we've had someone blue with Rex and someone red with Kane, so we should probably get someone green to complete the RGB thing we have going on here. Or, I guess, with the order I'm going in, it would be BRG, whatever. Come on and grab your friends for an adventure, as we'll be looking at Fern from Adventure Time. Now, if we want to get technical, Fern is more of a time paradox at the start before becoming more clone-like. You see, he was a version of Finn who was turned into a sword in the episode Is That You? When the main timeline version of Finn we watched throughout the episode snuck up on past Finn, who showed up obviously earlier in the episode, and touched him, causing the past Finn to literally explode and turn into a Finn sword, which is a sword that possesses a duplicate of the consciousness of Finn, or a duplicate of his soul. I don't know what the right way to word it is. Essentially, the sword is just another Finn. Later, the sword was stolen, and Finn would find it in the possession of Bandit Princess. Sometimes I forget that Adventure Time love to just make up princesses. There's probably a worm princess that I've completely forgotten about. Whilst fighting Bandit Princess with his grass sword, which was given to him by an evil grass wizard, he would plunge the grass sword into the Finn sword, where the other Finn's soul lived, unintentionally infecting the inside of the sword with a grass demon. The sword after this would seemingly lose its power. In the end of a later episode named Reboot, Finn stops his grass sword / arm from attacking his friend Susan. The vines from the arm began to retreat back into his body when he was stopping it, but then they passed by the damaged Finn sword. They obviously liked the sword more than Finn, because Finn's arm, that was being made by the grass sword, just pops right off of him and wraps around the Finn sword, making a grass ball that sprouts arms and legs. We then continue on in the episode Two Swords, which is like right after this episode, where the grass person takes a better shape to resemble Finn, but obviously it was still grass. Now this is where I would start calling him a clone. Whilst genetically he is more a grass demon, he still possesses the mind of Finn, albeit a little bit altered by the grass demon, as he searches photo albums that he remembers being in back in the treehouse, but obviously comes to realize he may not be the real Finn due to his skin being made of grass. It's suggested that in this confused state, he went into a rage, as he smashed pretty much anything up in the treehouse that he could see, besides BMO, he wouldn't hurt BMO, and is found pouring pancake syrup on floorboards. Finn had accepted that this other version of him existed, even offering him a Finn cake. This brought Grass Finn back to being calm. He would feel uncertain to who he is after this, as he still had the mind of Finn, but he, wasn't actually him. Fern would later be left alone with Jake, who helped him learn that he could no longer eat, which is horrible. Not only are you a clone who can't eat, but you have memories of meals you enjoyed and still can't eat them. He also can't breathe because, he doesn't have lungs. Jake decided to bring him out to fight monsters, as that's pretty much the only thing that he could do that Finn would also be able to do at that point in time, so Fern would obviously want to do it. And they fought the very wizard that made the grass sword, in turn making Fern. Fern begged the wizard for a reason for his creation, whatever his purpose was meant to be, but the wizard honestly didn't have a long-term plan. He didn't even think Fern would be a thing that could be made, making Fern realize that he literally had no purpose. Fern would live on the roof of the treehouse for a while until one day he found that he could make himself look exactly like Finn. No grass skin at all, he would look exactly as Finn would look. So obviously he wanted to replace him, as most clones do. He was close to doing it, but Finn unfortunately took the grass clone out with a weed whacker arm. But you don't have to worry, apparently Fern can't actually perish that way. He would be collected by Princess Bubblegum's uncle, Gumball, who would turn Fern into his very own Grass Knight, which would be called the Green Knight in the show. It wasn't until the final episode of Adventure Time that we would see Fern again in more of a main role. I mean, he was still a side character, but he was shown again properly instead of being a side character for an episode. But during a mass sleep hallucination thingamajig, Finn helped Fern find the grass demon that plagued him. It was the thing that was making him more aggressive. To note, not like Kane levels of aggressive, but it was probably the aggression that made him want to replace Finn in the first place. And Fern would slay this demon. But unfortunately, that was the very thing that was keeping him, alive and together. His final wish before this was that he wanted to be buried at the treehouse. He would leave a seed behind that shared a resemblance to the Finn sword. The seed was planted and the tree grew. Now, if we skipped ahead into the far future, the tree has grown massively, and atop it sat a newly made Finn sword, which was pulled out by a character named Shermie, potentially a reincarnation of Finn. Whilst Fern, again, wasn't exactly a clone by the usual standard, I would classify him as one nonetheless, as he still possessed the same mind and memories as his original Finn body, but had a differing body to him. What's fascinating is that most clones are entirely intentional, be it a million for an army or a small few that were made by a villain to eliminate a hero. But in Fern's case, it was entirely accidental. Finn had no clue that his past self would turn into a sword that shared a copied mind or soul or whatever it was realistically. The grass wizard had no clue that his demon would latch onto the Finn sword and make a version of Finn, a duplicate. Fern was made without purpose, which one may think is freeing for a sentient being, but for someone who believed they already had a purpose that was taken from them by their original self, it's got to be devastating. Learning that you were literally an accident would be insane on one's mental health. As for his attire though, he is very round as Grass Finn. It's not bad. I don't think I like it though. He also has his disturbing candy form, but my clear favorite would have to be the Green Knight form, because that goes really hard. Now, I want you to think about this. To wake up one day believing it's just another normal day, right? When you somehow find yourself in front of yourself. Being cloned sounds annoying to have someone who is a clone of you, but being the clone is terrifying and saddening. You know you should let the true you keep their life as it's what they've worked for. But you also feel like you worked for that too, as you share those memories, that you deserve some facet of that life. But from there, the story depends on who you are. A kind, giving soul would take the blow. They would go find a new life to live. Others may make a deal with their original self to allow both of them to live their lives together as like twins or something. Or, if you're willing, you would replace yourself and take your place back as the original. But you would never feel quite right, as you would know that you're not yourself. I know that the clone trope is pretty heavily used, so I want to hear all about your favorite clone characters down in the comments. I swear to God, if you somehow suggest something that's in Kamen Rider, I'm hoping I said that correctly this time, I'm going to be amazed that they covered so many tropes. But apparently there's like tons of series of it, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was a clone trope in there somewhere. One of you will point it out, no doubt. If I was a clone though, I would probably be friends with myself, in all honesty. Do you know how much faster I could make these videos if I had 2 of me? No, speaking of 2s though, I hit 2,000 subscribers. Again, big thanks to all that have subscribed. I do have a whole list of trope ideas to cover alongside some suggestions made by you all. I'm making sure to give out credit for if I am going to use them though. I'm still figuring out my way through this YouTube landscape, so any pointers for what you want to see or what I should change would be amazing. One of them already I have planned is to get a proper camera because I've been using my phone this entire time, if you could believe it. But yeah, I think it's plug time. I had to change the outro music, by the way, because apparently it was copyrighted. Somehow it only affected my last video though, even though I used it in like 6 other videos before that. If you like this video, then feel free to subscribe as I post more like this every weekend. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video, if you liked it, as it pushes it into the algorithm for others to see. I also have a membership for $2 USD a month. You'll get access to videos as soon as they're ready, alongside a shout out in the outro. And you'll be supporting the channel as well. And, as always, not sponsored. Big thanks to all the new tourists: Tina Buttercup, Crystal Kensbit, Jasmine Wilson, Wilbur Flight, and Nugsy1. I'll see you all next week.